introduction, Michael. So we'll discuss some findings related to eye tracking, actual eye tracking of images. But first, let me start with the question, which one is prettier? I think the answer is obvious to all of you. And the reason why the answer is obvious was actually given by Michael's great presentation. There are the reasons that some things appear beautiful and some are not are related to natural selection and, in fact, sexual selection. And there was this time in the middle of the 20th century where behaviorism was king, and people thought that everything can be changed through the environment, and that seemed socially promising, you know, the social constructivism, but it turns out it's not true. It turns out that the diagram that Michael showed with the root and the branches is, for me, the best depiction of what's happening. So, and of course, it's not only true in humans that we have a sense of beauty. Dobzhansky, quite famous biologist, thought so, but it's not true because he says it's among the traits that elevate man above the brutes. But what about this one? You would agree that everybody thinks it's beautiful, both us and the peacocks. And what about the barbirds and their displays? They're actually, the males are decorating their nest in a way that makes it attractive to females. And not just that, in fact, they create perspective illusions in the way that they arrange the bits that they put in the nests to make them look bigger, okay? So, and of course, part of what is in our experience of beauty is fractals, and there is some research on fractals here at the poster. But as this quote by Nikos says, fractals are an important component of this effect, but they don't represent the full gamut of connective qualities. And research by Michael and Nikos demonstrates exactly what this full gamut is, and of course Alexander's 15 properties. So the work itself that was published last year was done with the help of iMotions Online. iMotions is a company that's working on biometrics. And iMotions Online is a system they have with which you can download some software, calibrate a webcam, and the webcam can track your eyes without any specialized equipment. So you're just sitting at home, you open your laptop, you just stand completely still, you follow the instructions, you just look at some crosses, and then the software says, don't move for the next 5 minutes, and you try not to move. And then you look at the images, the camera records your eye movement. In the end, you have a post-calibration, you look at the crosses again, and then hopefully the results are valid. The post-calibration process is in case you have moved a little bit, okay? So you probably all know about this Harris poll from 2020 that shows that most Americans preferred traditional architecture for federal buildings as opposed to modern architecture. And this is the proportion that corresponded to the preference. Around 72% prefer traditional and 28% prefer modern. And the interesting thing about it is that this is across political affiliations, genders, ethnic origins. So there are some slight differences. It's like 74 Republicans, 68 Democrats, but most people correspond to that. And so this should be seen in a bipartisan way, but instead it has been also politicized. So let me go back. So the president of this National Civic Arts Society that did the Harris poll was fired upon the election of President Biden for reasons that are strange for me, because this is for everybody's interest. It's not for Republicans or for Democrats or for everybody else. So anyway, so this is the paper we had last year. What we did is we looked at the series of images. One batch were all the images of the Harris poll, and there were also other images that we took ourselves. And I'm going to present some of the results to you. So these are the results for one pair of buildings. So you see the heat map demonstrates the probability of the eye fixating on a position on the image. And the warmer the colors, the higher probability. So you see that most of the time the eye goes to the traditional building. At the bottom left, you can see the dwell time, which is how much time they spend, and the TTFF, which is the time to first fixation. Okay? So in this case, you see that it goes, not only stays more on the classical building, but it also goes first the classical building. If you have a look at this, you will see that it stays more on the classical, but it goes first on the modern. And you'll say, well, what's happening here? And the same here, okay? So, the reason for that is that there is a left to right preference. And it has been shown that this is consistent even across cultures, even for people whose handwriting goes from right to left, even at preschool babies and even some animals. So when designing such experiments, one should always have images alternating. You cannot do it for the same images because you want to expose people to new images every time, but you can have, one pair like this, the other like that. And then in the end, you can see if there is something left of some preference for the time to first fixation. The dwell time is always higher for the classical building. So all of these images were eye-tracked in addition to others. And this is an example. This is a paired image of Harvard University student dormitory and another in the residential building. So you see the same kind of result. The data that are presented at the bottom left, maybe it's not very clearly visible, the numbers, they come from what we call areas of interest. So if you look at the bottom images here and also in the previous examples, you see that the buildings have been highlighted. So the figures we have, the numbers, are from within the highlighted area, okay? So not from the sky, not from the background, not from the foreground. Another example, this is a picture I had created for a previous paper, for a survey paper. This is a landscape in South Tyrol, very close to where my main affiliation is, in the city of Meran. And normally the city is on the left. This is a walk on the hillside, and there's nothing on the right. So I did two things. I added a building that's part of the Golestan Palace complex in Tehran, in Iran, or a generic industrial building. Now, a resident of the Alpine region would probably be more familiar with a modernist building than with a Persian building. And yet, look at what the score was in the survey. If you add A and B, and these are now, this is, well, this you see it. Yeah, you see the eye tracking. There's no doubt that people prefer the building on the left. No doubt at all. Their eyes go first to that. I shouldn't say prefer. Their eyes go to that first. And then there are the preference data from the previous paper. And you see that if you add A and B, B is from another building from the same complex in Tehran, it's, this difference is devastating, okay? And it even looks, look at the graph on the right, even looks more familiar, which I think is very interesting, because most people haven't seen that before in that context, in that environment, but it feels more familiar because of its qualities. And this is also from the last paper, changing the surface detail of buildings, adding or subtracting. Again, the more texture there is, the more the eye is drawn to it. And these are more or less modern buildings, yes. The same here. This is a sort of a naughty experiment I did. I used it first for the paper on the right, and then for the new paper on the left. So I took the Duomo in Milan, and then I took the glass facade of a curtain wall building, and I followed the outline. I replaced the details and I followed the outline, having 3 iterations with less and less details. And on the right, you see the eye tracking simulation software, how it loses it predicts a loss of interest. And on the left, you see the actual eye tracking. Needless to say what's happening, we see that. And some other examples, you have fenestration. Actually, this house looks a bit like a face, okay? So with and without the windows. You have this wooden spoon that Anne prepared with just two dots in a line to make it look like a face, and the eyes go more to the face-like image, and an artificial and a natural image. Okay, so we can take all these together and make some graphs. First is time to first fixation. You see that with the exception of artificial versus natural, and the reason for that is that there were very few images, this was just, you know, a proof of concept. Despite the left to right preference, and despite having normalized for that, we see that the eye actually usually takes less time to go to a traditional building, okay? See, it's a shorter time to first fixation. The difference is not significant statistically, I think, because of this issue. And I imagine that if we had more images, this would be significant. But you can clearly see that it goes quicker to the traditional side. When it comes to dwell time, there is no doubt about it. The difference is striking. Okay, we spend more time on that. And then you can take all these categories, style, texture, fenestration, eyes, blah, 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 and just create two categories, nature-like geometry and non-nature-like geometry. And if you add them all together, again, you see this difference, shorter time to first fixation and longer, much longer dwell time for the nature-like geometry. Now, to summarize the findings, we have now availability of eye tracking at home. You can use eye tracking for architecture and design studies. There is a relation between geometric organization of visual stimuli and eye tracking responses, and of course, between those and preference data, because one can say, yeah, you look at something very quickly, or you spend more time looking at it, but maybe because it's ugly, maybe it's bizarre, maybe it's threatening. No, actually, it is prettier as we have cross-referenced these images with preference results of our own and of the Harris poll. And there is something that I need to add here. Some people, like the late Roger Scruton, whom I wish I would have talked with, had reservations about this kind of studies because he says, and he was right, that you cannot replace aesthetics with any natural science, and of course you cannot, because, as he said, we live on the surface. Our experience is what it is, despite what's happening under the hood. And he was absolutely right, but the reason why we need to do that is because why these experiments are interesting is because A, well, they're interesting as basic science, and B, because we need to show to people that when they try to say that we are against progress, actually it is our side who is following the current scientific developments, and science shows us now that this is the kind of environment we're tuned to live in, and we may have socially or educationally influenced differences, as Michael showed, but this is our natural environment, and it's been expressed by architecture for 5,000 years up until the 1920s. And this is a discussion we're going to have in this book that we're editing, and hopefully this will help also practitioners and designers understand what's happening in this field and maybe apply it in their future projects. So, thank you very much.